Open your Bible to the very last page. You will find the Revelation of John. It is a book of dragons, beasts, and symbolic prophecy. But for hundreds of years, the early Christians didn't just read John's Apocalypse. They read Peter's Apocalypse. This is the book that almost made the cut. It was listed in the Muratorian Fragment, the oldest list of New Testament books, as scripture. It was read in churches across Rome and Egypt every Good Friday. It was considered the authentic word of the leader of the apostles. But then it vanished. The church fathers slowly pushed it into the shadows. They stopped reading it. They stopped copying it. Eventually, they banned it. Why? It wasn't because of dragons or beasts. It was because the Apocalypse of Peter contains something that terrified the bishops. It contains the first ever guided tour of hell. It describes, in high-definition horror, exactly what happens to sinners in the afterlife. It was so graphic that the church decided it was too frightening for the general public. They wanted a religion based on hope, not a religion based on nightmares. For centuries, scholars knew this book existed because ancient writers quoted it, but no one had seen the actual text. It was a ghost story. Then, in the winter of 1886, a French archaeologist named Urbain Bourriant was digging in Akhmim, Egypt. He uncovered the grave of a Christian monk from the 8th century. Inside the grave, resting on the chest of the skeleton, was a small parchment book. It contained fragments of the Gospel of Peter, the Book of Enoch, and, finally, the lost Apocalypse of Peter. The parchment was written in Greek. Later, an even older version was found in Ethiopia, written in Ge'ez. When scholars translated these texts, they realized why the book had been buried. It wasn't a theology textbook. It was a vision of judgment so specific and so brutal that it laid the foundation for Dante's Inferno 1,000 years later. Every image of hell you have in your head, lakes of fire hanging by tongues, demons with whips, didn't come from the Bible. It came from this lost book. The text begins not in a vision, but in a conversation. Jesus is sitting on the Mount of Olives with his disciples. They are looking at the temple in Jerusalem. The disciples ask him the question that haunts every human being. Lord, tell us what the end will be like. And what is the reward of the righteous, and what is the punishment of the wicked? In the canonical Gospels, Matthew 24, Jesus answers with vague prophecies about wars and rumors of wars. But in this forbidden text, Jesus pulls back the curtain completely. He touches Peter's eyes, the physical world melts away. Jesus says to Peter, "Go and see." Peter is suddenly transported out of time. He sees two distinct realms. On the right, he sees a world of blinding light. On the left, a world of suffocating darkness. The tour is about to begin, and unlike John's Revelation, which uses symbols, Peter sees people, real people, not neighbors, family members. He sees the fate of the human soul stripped bare. Before the horror begins, Jesus shows Peter the reward of the saved. This section is short, almost as if the author wants to hurry past it to get to the gore. Peter sees a vast space outside of this world, shining with light brighter than the sun. The earth there blooms with unfading flowers and spices. The plants are glorious. He sees the inhabitants of this place. They are clothed in the raiment of angels, and their skin is white as snow. They are beautiful. Peter is stunned by their appearance. He asks, "Lord, who are these?" Jesus replies, "These are your righteous brothers, the ones who kept my commandments." It is a scene of perfect peace, but it serves a narrative purpose. It is the control group. It exists to create a sharp contrast, because just a few feet away, separated by a great chasm, lies the place of squalling, the place of judgment. And as Peter turns his head, the light fades, the flowers wither, and the screams begin. Peter turns his gaze from the beautiful garden. The text describes a place over against that land, a mirror image of horror. It is described as a place of squalling, a place of unquenchable fire. The first thing Peter notices is the darkness. It isn't just the absence of light, it is a heavy, suffocating atmosphere. But as his eyes adjust, he realizes the darkness is glowing. It is lit by the flames of a great lake of burning mud and mire. This is the central feature of Peter's hell, the Lake of Temen. It isn't just fire, it is a mixture of fire and filth. It clings, it burns, and floating in this lake are the souls of the damned. But unlike modern depictions of hell, where everyone suffers the same fate, the Apocalypse of Peter introduces a terrifying concept: contrapasso. The punishment fits the crime. The way you sinned on earth determines exactly how you suffer in eternity. Peter sees the angel of punishment, Ezrael, presiding over this chaos. And the tour of the specific sins begins. The first group Peter encounters are the blasphemers. These are the people who use their voices to mock God, to spread lies, and to destroy reputations. On earth, their tongues were their weapons. In hell, their tongues are their chains. Peter writes, "And I saw also others hanging by their tongues. These were they that blasphemed the way of righteousness." Imagine the visual. Men and women suspended in midair, the entire weight of their bodies held up by the muscle of their tongue. Underneath them burns a fire that never goes out. They are screaming, but they cannot form words because the very instrument of their speech is being stretched to the breaking point. This image became iconic in medieval art. It was a warning: be careful what you say. The tongue is a small fire, but it can burn down a whole forest. And in the Apocalypse of Peter, God ensures that the part of the body that sinned is the part of the body that pays the price. Peter moves further into the gloom. He sees a massive pit filled with burning mire, a sticky sewage-like sludge. Above it, he sees men and women hanging. These are the adulterers, the ones who broke their vows. But their positioning is specific to their gender and their sin. The text says, "And there were also women hanging by their hair above that boiling mire." These were they who adorned themselves for adultery. Their vanity, their hair, which they used to seduce, becomes the rope that holds them over the fire. But the men are treated differently. And the men who were with them were hanging by their feet, and their heads were in that mire. The men are inverted. They are hanging upside down, their heads submerged in the boiling filth. They cry out, "We did not believe that we should come to this place." It is a scene of total humiliation. The pleasure they sought in secret has become a public spectacle of shame. The next vision is perhaps the most disturbing of all. Peter sees a gorge filled with venomous beasts and reptiles. In this pit are the murderers. They are cast into a narrow place full of evil reptiles, and the beasts bite them and tear their flesh. But the physical pain isn't the worst part. The worst part is the audience. Standing on the edge of the pit, looking down at the murderers, are the souls of the victims. The people they killed are watching them. The text says, "And the souls of the murdered stood and looked upon the punishment of those murderers and said, 'O God, righteous is thy judgment.'" This is psychological torture. The murderer has to look into the eyes of the person he killed forever. There is no hiding, there is no escaping the guilt. But it gets worse for the women who committed a specific type of murder. Peter sees a ravine where women are standing up to their necks in gore. These are the women who procured abortions, and opposite them sit their children, born prematurely, crying out to God. From the children, flashes of lightning go forth and strike the eyes of the women. It is a cycle of eternal accusation. The innocent judge the guilty. Peter walks further into the abyss and encounters a group of men and women dressed in rags. They are rolling on sharp, red-hot pebbles that are sharper than swords. These are the rich, specifically the misers who refuse to help the poor. On earth, these people wore the finest linen and silk. They obsessed over their appearance and their comfort. But in the logic of the Apocalypse of Peter, the afterlife reverses their reality. Because they loved their clothes more than they loved the poor, they are forced to wear filthy rags that are teeming with lice and vermin. The pebbles they roll on represent the hardness of their hearts. They ignored the suffering of others, so now they are forced to feel every sharp edge of their own selfishness. They cry out for mercy, but the angels ignore them, just as they ignored the beggars at their gates. It is the ultimate reversal of fortune. The kings of the earth have become the wretched of the pit. Next, Peter sees a place filled with boiling pitch, tar, and blood. Standing in this sticky, suffocating liquid up to their knees are men and women struggling to move. These are the usurers, the moneylenders, the people who demanded interest on loans and profited from the desperation of their neighbors. In the ancient world, usury was considered a form of violence. It was a way to enslave the poor. The punishment here reflects the nature of their sin. They are stuck. They trapped others in debt, so now they are trapped in tar. The substance is vile and heavy, just like the burden they placed on the poor. This punishment highlights a major theme in this forbidden book. Economic crimes are just as damning as violent crimes. You don't have to kill someone to go to hell. You just have to profit from their destruction. The scene shifts to a terrifying landscape of high cliffs and deep drops. Peter sees men and women running in panic. They are being chased by demons who are beating them with chains and fiery whips. These are the idolaters, the people who abandoned the true God to worship statues of wood and stone. Their punishment is an eternal loop of madness. They are forced to run up the jagged cliffs. When they reach the top, the demons push them off. They fall into the fire below, their bodies breaking on the rocks. And then they are forced to climb back up and do it again. This represents the futility of their faith. On earth, they trusted in false gods that could not save them. In hell, they are forced to realize that their idols cannot catch them when they fall. It is a cycle of rising hope and crashing despair that never ends. Perhaps the most gruesome image is reserved for those who betrayed the faith. Peter sees a place where men and women are gnawing on their own tongues. Their mouths are filled with fire. These are the apostates, the ones who knew the truth but turned away to spread lies. They are the false witnesses. But they are not alone. Alongside them are those who perverted their own bodies. The text describes lesbians and homosexuals being driven up a great cliff by the angels of Tartarus and cast down. This section of the text is incredibly controversial today, but it reflects the strict morality of the 2nd century church. It views the corruption of the body and the corruption of the truth as sins that consume you from the inside out. The image of eating one's own tongue suggests that their lies have become their food. They are literally consuming themselves for eternity. After seeing the lakes of fire, the hanging tongues, and the torture of the damned, Peter does something unexpected. He doesn't rejoice in God's justice, he cries. In the Ethiopic text, Peter turns to Jesus and says, "O Lord, have pity on the creature of thy hands. Didst thou create them for this, that they should be destroyed?" Peter is essentially telling Jesus that the punishment is too harsh. It would have been better if they had not been created. This is a bold moment. The disciple is questioning the master. In the canonical Bible, questioning God's judgment is usually shut down, like in Job. But in this forbidden text, Jesus does not scold Peter, he listens. He acknowledges that Peter's compassion is a reflection of God's own heart. And then he reveals a secret that was meant to be hidden from the foolish men of the world. For a long time, we only had the Ethiopic version of the text, which ends abruptly. But another fragment, the Rayner fragment, contains a different ending, a shocking ending. In this version, Jesus tells Peter that in the end times, the saved, the righteous, will look down from heaven and see the suffering of the damned in hell. The righteous will weep for them. They will pray to God and ask for mercy on behalf of the sinners. And God will say yes. The text claims that because of the prayers of the saved, God will grant a baptism of salvation to the souls in hell. He will pull them out of the fire and bring them into the Elysian field, a paradise. This creates a theological bomb called universalism, the idea that hell is not eternal and that eventually everyone gets saved. Jesus tells Peter, "Go now and hide this revelation, tell no man." It implies that hell is real, but it is temporary. It's a washing machine for the soul, not an incinerator. If you tell people, "Don't worry, you can sin all you want and eventually God will let you out of hell," then no one will follow the rules. The fear of God evaporates. The Church Fathers believed that the threat of eternal punishment was necessary to keep society from collapsing into chaos. They viewed this secret ending as dangerous propaganda, so they made a calculated decision. They kept the graphic descriptions of torture to scare people, but cut out the ending, the hope. Eventually, they realized the whole book was too risky, so they replaced the apocalypse of Peter with the apocalypse of John, Revelation. John's revelation is symbolic and confusing, but it is firm on one thing: the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. There is no exit door in John's version. The church chose the book that kept the prison locked. The apocalypse of Peter remains one of the most fascinating what-ifs of history. If this book had stayed in the Bible, our entire view of the afterlife would be different. We might view hell as a hospital rather than a dungeon. We have explored the traitor, Judas, the child, Thomas, and the afterlife, Peter. But there is another figure in the Bible who is surrounded by mystery, a woman who was cursed by a demon lover. There is a book in the Apocrypha called Tobit. It tells the story of a woman named Sarah who was haunted by the demon Asmodeus. Every time she married a man, the demon killed him on the wedding night. 7 husbands died, until a young man named Tobias arrived with a weapon made from a fish's heart. Next time we open the Book of Tobit, the story of the demon lover. Subscribe to the 67th book. The truth is out there.